a ninth generation Australian here. And I'm with Michael today. We're going to be your MCs for the National Act of Recognition event today.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? We brought the flies with us just to keep our going to sleep. But so I'm a Dungari fellow from North Coast, New South Wales. I've been born in Sydney and reared up nearby. And I'm an Anglican minister. Great gig, great job. No, but that's what I do. I lead a church, and I get the privilege to come along here this morning here with you fellas. As always, we always acknowledge God, the creator of heaven and earth, because he's worthy of all praise and honour. We also recognise that the Aboriginal people of the land, but only Barb's not here yet, so we're going to wait for her to do a welcome. I just want to acknowledge, until she arrives, that we are here on a special land, God's creation, and our people were custodians of the land for generations, and wait for her when she does arrive, we'll welcome her up to do like an official. So, a bit different, but that's right, we're different people, and we can handle it. So we're going to continue on with the program.
We've just got a few notices first that we have to run. Firstly, in case there's a fire, we haven't got an official place, but let's all just meet down on the beach here. Everyone fine with that? Hang out on the beach. After the event today, there's a lunch, and we know that some people might want to hang around late. We just wanted to warn you that the gates do close at 7 p.m. Otherwise, you're camping here. Lastly, the first aid person today, if there's any issues, is Anne McDowell, right here. There we go. Can everyone see Anne? So she is the one who's going to take care of us today. Thank you. And lastly, for those who are hanging around tomorrow, there is a separate Yarn Up event here from 10 o'clock. Is that right, Lindsay? 11 o'clock is the new time. 11 o'clock meeting here again. So you'll hear more about that at the end. But for those who want to hang around tomorrow, that will be on as well.
And just to follow my brother, I want to acknowledge my old people here, my Uncle Ray, Uncle Oz. They're my seniors. They're my role models. They're supermodels. And but I respect them because they've been paving the way for me as a young man. So I show my respect and honour to you fellas. And thank God for them. And then we're going to move on to point 3A and have come up, Uncle Lindsay. Come on down.
Thank you, thank you for being with us today. We who are gathered here on the key site where our shared history began. There's no other site in Australia like it. This site the place of the first encounter between the Europeans and the people who were here. So we welcome you to this. We thank you for joining us with us on the YouTube live broadcast. And we take a moment. We take a moment to honour First Nations people of all these lands. We honour the elders and members of communities, both past and present, who belong to country on the homelands of their people. We've gathered for that's all right, but wasn't that one working very well? We are gathered together for a truth-telling day on this key site. And it's the very site the Endeavour dropped anchor on the water here at Kamay Botany Bay, just behind me. Given it's a truth-telling day, we are going to be looking at the early records that explain how the stain on our colonising past began. We will look at the records that lead us into the truth of what happened, and those records explain so clearly how the stain on our colonising past began. As we look into those records, we will find that they are very disturbing to read and to hear. And some of us may find those records hard to bear, may find them even painful. For that reason, we want to offer you a word of reassurance. A national act of recognition is not in the blame game. We are not in the blame game. You will not hear anything said today that is intended to leave you feeling wounded and condemned. Indeed, we want the opposite. We want you going home today filled with joy, joyful that at long last the truth about our colonising history and the stain on our colonising past, joyful that the factual written records are finally beginning to come into the open bit by bit across Australia. Bit by bit, the truth, the records themselves are beginning to become known. And that is our aim today. A national act of recognition has one aim and only one, and that is to bring the factual written records into the open from where they have been hidden. In bringing them into the open, bring them into public scrutiny, place those records under public scrutiny, your scrutiny, and leave you free to come to your own mind about those records. As we go through the morning, you may notice something. There are three terms that we will use from time to time today that for us, for a national act of recognition in our context, those three terms because they all have the same objectives. Hello. Those three terms all have the same objective. So then, let the truth-telling begin. And we start at the start, and I take you back to the year 1768. 1768. And we are at point 3 on your tracking sheet. In roughly the middle of that year, the H.M. Bark Endeavour was berthed at Plymouth in southern England. During that period, it was being made ready for its voyage into the Southern Oceans. During that preparation period, Lieutenant James Cook, no, he wasn't a captain. When James Cook was here, he held the naval rank of lieutenant. However, he was also master of the ship, and that gave rise to the notion of captain. After all, Captain Cook rolls so easily off the tongue, does it not? All very convenient, but all very untrue. Let's deal with the myth busting, some of the nonsense we have been fed for 250 years. It is my understanding that James Cook did go on to achieve the rank of naval captain, but when he was here, he was a lieutenant. I go back to during the preparation period. During the preparation period, 2 British authorities came to Cook, and they each handed him a sealed envelope containing instructions for the voyage. When Cook later opened those envelopes, he found they contained a common theme. Roughly paraphrased, that theme went something like this. When you meet with the people of other lands, if you are thinking of becoming aggressive with them, don't do it. Just don't do it. In the detail of it, those commands by the British authorities went this way. On the 30th of July in that year, the Admiralty of Great Britain visited Cook. They gave him their envelope, and when he later opened it, he found it read in part, when you meet with the people of other lands, show them every kind of civility and regard. Several days later, on the 10th of August, the President of the British Royal Society came to Cook. And when Cook opened his envelope later, he found that the president of the British Royal Society, James Douglas, who was also known as Lord Morton because he was the 13th Earl of Morton, and apparently a very great man, as we might see in just a moment. And it is after Lord Morton that our Moreton Bay here, just over the Queensland border, received its whitefella name. James Douglas, Lord Morton, Cook found, was far more direct in his instructions to Cook than was the British Admiralty. He was blunt. He said it like it is. When Cook opened his envelope sometime later, in part, this is what he read. Have it in view that shedding the blood of those people is a crime of the highest nature. They are the natural, and in the strictest sense of the word, the legal possessors of the regions they inhabit. No European nation has a right to occupy any part of their country or settle among them without their voluntary consent. The Endeavour sailed some 6 days later. Those were the instructions to Cook before he left England. It would seem to me those instructions were very easy to understand. Well, we are about to hear what really happened. When the Endeavour dropped anchor 20 months later in the water just behind me. We are about to hear what happened after just 15 minutes of the first hour of the first day of our shared history. The stain on our colonising past began with this. We are about to hear the truth. Thank you so much for your time.
To tell us about the next part of this history, I'd like to invite from my neck of the woods, the Bishop Mark Short from the Canberra-Goulburn Anglican Diocese. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Lindsay. Thank you to you and Anne for your leadership and your commitment to justice these past 28 years. What a long and at times costly journey it has been for you, and we honour you today. It is also an honour to gather with each one of you today at Kamay Botany Bay on Gweagal country for this occasion, which is at the same time both solemn and yet hopeful. Solemn because today is a recognition of and reckoning with the truth of the Australian story. yet hopeful, because in telling and hearing the truth, there is the opportunity to find freedom and justice and healing in a shared future. Just as a seed in time becomes a plant in time becomes a crop in time becomes a harvest, so it is with history. Today we consider how the earliest days of European colonisation of this country planted seeds of injustice that would in time reap a tragic harvest. We just heard how the instructions given to Lieutenant James Cook were that he was to act only with the voluntary consent of the inhabitants of this land, respecting their legal right to occupy and flourish where they dwelt. Tragically, within minutes of this very first landfall on this place, those instructions were violated in letter and in spirit. To give you some flavour of what took place, let me read some extracts from the journal of Joseph Banks, recording what happened here on the April the 28th, 1770. At one, he writes, "We came to an anchor abreast of a small village consisting of about 6 or 8 houses. As soon as we approached the rocks, 2 of the men came down upon them, each armed with a lance. They called to us in a harsh-sounding language, shaking their lances and menacing, in all appearances resolved to dispute our landing to the utmost, though they were but 2, and we were 30 or 40 at least. In this manner we parleyed with them for about a quarter of an hour, they waving to us to be gone, we again signing that we wanted water and that we meant them no harm. They remained resolute, so a musket was fired over them, the effect of which was that the youngest of the 2 dropped a bundle of lances on the rock at the instant in which he heard the report. He, however, snatched them up again, and both renewed their threats and opposition. A musket loaded with small shot was now fired at the eldest of the 2, who was about 40 yards from the boat. It struck him on the legs. He minded it very little, so another was immediately fired at him. On this, he ran up to the house about 100 yards distant and soon returned with the shield. In the meantime, we had landed on the rock. He immediately threw a lance at us and the young man and another, which fell among the thickets, but hurt nobody. 2 more muskets with small shot were then fired at them, on which the eldest threw 1 more lance and then ran away, as did the other. We went up to the houses, in one of which we found the children hid behind the shield and a piece of bark. We were conscious from the distance the people had been from us, that when we fired the shot could have done them no material harm. We therefore resolved to leave the children on the spot without even opening their shelter. We, however, thought it no improper measure to take away with us all the lances which we could find about the houses, amounting in number to 40 or 50. Friends, in this short extract, remember it's an extract written from the perspective of the colonizers. We are immediately confronted with 4 criminal acts. First, the act of trespass. The inhabitants of this land made it very clear that they were not giving their consent to outsiders and strangers coming upon their land uninvited, yet that was disregarded. Secondly, the criminal act of intimidation through force of arms, firing weapons over and at the original inhabitants. Thirdly, the criminal offence of assault, causing bodily harm. And fourthly, the criminal offence of theft, taking those lances, which were of course fishing spears, the means of subsistence for those who dwelt here, without permission or recompense. Raw criminal acts, which had they been committed in Britain, would have resulted in the prosecution of those responsible. Criminal acts which at their heart reveal an attitude of dehumanization, a belief that the inhabitants of this land were not worthy of the respect and rights which those Europeans so easily took for granted for themselves. 4 acts, 4 seeds, foreshadowing a tragic harvest to come.
Thanks for that. I don't want to fall short, but very stirring accounts and very saddening accounts. My heart is weighed heavy as I try to imagine that, and a bit frustrating. Even emotions of anger come up in my heart. I think, what's wrong with these fellas? But at the same time, I balance it in my head, in my heart, that through some of these atrocities, and I still see the grace of God and His kindness to our people to sustain us through so many things, but it's still the sadness and the hurt still sits. It's not. It still sits there, and so it's like pulling a band-aid off again. You know, off a sore, it has an emotional response. It's not like, oh, great information. It's actually stirring. Yeah. So it's good. Truth telling is always good, as long as it's balanced and accommodated with, I guess, grace and kindness. It's a hard thing to hold those two together, but I think it's important. I think it's important to try and, otherwise we go firing off one way, and sometimes that's not a good way. But by holding the two together, the goodness of God, the acts of evil, and God in His grace and His mercy accommodates that. So I wish you well as you process your emotions, but process them. If you don't, you become emotionally influenced to sometimes bad thoughts. So we keep check of our emotions, otherwise they rule us and lead us. But now we move on to my sister. So I want to invite up the chairperson, Nolan Timbry, of the La Perouse Local Aboriginal Land Council. Thank you very much.
Back down because shorter. Everyone can hear me, yeah. Good morning, everyone. As Michael said, my name is Nolene Timbry. I'm the chairperson of the La Perouse Local Aboriginal Land Council. I'm also a proud Gweagal woman from across the bay. And I guess at first I want to offer deep apologies for Auntie Barb Sims, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, and she was meant to welcome you all to country. So on behalf of her, on behalf of our community, on behalf of my elders and my ancestors, I offer you a warm welcome to the traditional lands of the Gweagal people. And I want to pay special mention to Charlene, who's come to us from desert country. We haven't actually had the chance to yarn yet, but we will later on. I want to recognise Uncle Ozzie Cruz, Ray Minicon, of course, and Michael Anderson up in the back there, who are all people that I deeply respect. And for every Aboriginal person here, I want to pay respects to the lands that to the lands that you have come from and travelled through to be here. And as we've heard already, this place here at Colonel is a very special place to us, and it's a very special place to Australia as a nation, because this is where the shared history of our country first began. And I say it purposely as a shared history because it's not the full history of this country, but it is a part of our shared history, and that's where it started back in 1770. I'm a little bit flawed by the reading of the diary and of the journal, and I guess I want to touch on that a little bit because I had the opportunity to read the first-hand account, so the actual written journal, last year. And although I knew the words, I'd seen the words that many times, it still deeply affected me in reading, I guess reading the words, flies, I'm so sorry, in just reading those words as a handwritten account. And I understand in my head that these are scientists, these are explorers, these are learned men, I guess, who are writing these accounts, but the lack of humanity in them really touched me and really affected me. And there was such an arrogance in those words that I had to stop reading a number of times. Mark, you touched on I guess when they came ashore and they perpetrated the first act of aggression against our people. They, I guess, explored. They offered trinkets. They looked for people. Our people didn't want to, in any way, engage. That's recorded later in the journals as well. But they came ashore and they kept going on their business, as you said, without permission, without consent, without any sort of, I guess, real understanding of the people that they were, I guess, trespassing on. Reading that, knowing that, hurts me deeply because these are my people. And I know that, you know, we've got our own stories from that time, and I guess as the stories go, that meeting on the shore, I guess, and those lances that were thrown, they were about cautioning. They were about, I guess, our people seeing really pale people for the very first time. You know, they thought that they were spirits. They thought they were the dead coming back. And so those lances were thrown as cautions. And the words that were spoken were, "You are all dead. Go away. You don't belong here." But none of that was heeded. And we all know from the journals exactly what happened afterwards. On a bit of a lighter note, those 40 or 50 spears that were taken, it's not a lighter note actually. They were taken because Joseph Banks thought that they were poisoned. And so they were removed for, I guess, the explorers' protection and safety. They were fishing spears for the majority. They were hunting spears. They weren't poisoned. They were our people's way of getting a food source. So they didn't disarm a community. They took away a food source. And it would have taken a long time to replace those 40 or 50 spears. The lighter part of that story is we've just gotten back 4 of those spears. And I was part of a delegation that went over to the UK to retrieve them in April last year. So we're waiting for that visitor centre to get built so they can come back home. And that's a huge win for us. Our intention in bringing those back is to have tangible objects to tell our side of that story. They are the only 4 spears that we know of out of 40 or 50. We don't know what happened to the others. But we have put out in media and other publications that if anyone wants to go through their cupboards and have a look, we are happy to help them out with that. Um, you know, talking from my community's perspective, and if I think about truth telling to us is about the resilience, talking about the resilience of our old people, and the fact that we've survived. Um, you know, after colonisation, especially here in Sydney, a lot of the Indigenous people, the Aboriginal people, were kind of then as the colony grew, they were collected up from around the Sydney, coastal Sydney, from around the Sydney Basin, and over here around the bay. And we were put in our community over there at La Perouse. Now, it's a great community, I'm not saying anything about that, but all of these lands were taken from us. We are the first of the First Nations people of this country to be impacted by that European arrival. We are still connected to country. We still celebrate and share our culture, and we do that because we want people to understand where we come from, and we want to share that so that we want a pathway to a reconciled future. So for us, truth-telling is about that. It's about embracing the past, all of it, all of the ugly bits, all of the really beautiful bits, but also, and then I guess, understanding where we're all coming from and embracing the beauty of that shared history. And yes, there are some really bad parts about that, but I've been to Germany. I've travelled through Berlin, and I've seen how the Germans really embrace that really ugly part of their history, and I think that we can too. So here, in these truth-telling events, and I really want to celebrate and thank Lindsay for his hard work over many, many decades to push this forward. I think this is where the shared history of this country began, and I think this is where we'll make a change, and we'll make it for better for everyone. Another thing that we've done over here in this part of the country is this national park, and if you've travelled here before, if you've come, you go past a lot of, I don't know, Captain Cook High School, Endeavour High School, all the Captain Cook parks, the drives, the roads, the Endeavours, the Joseph Banks, and you know, you go past all of those monuments, all of those landmarks and stuff, and we're trying to flip the script on that a little bit. This place was, as you drove into Kurnell in years gone by, you'd come across a sign that said birthplace of modern Australia. It now says meeting point, or because we celebrate it now as a meeting of two cultures. A couple of years ago, we also had the opportunity to, as part of the improvements made here to the park, was to install some new sculptures. I don't know if you've seen them either. Before that process, I think there were about 13 monuments scattered along the coastline here, all sandstone, and if you pardon my French, all monuments to dead white men. And I don't say that with any sort of malice. But we've now got some really beautiful sculptures that celebrate the Indigenous part of this history. So what we want to do is, I guess, make it more of a well-rounded story, and we're trying to do that here, and hopefully we can do that across Australia. So thank you all for listening. I'm sorry if I waffled. I guess from our perspective, we're really proud that we're part of we're part of helping people to understand the real history of this country. So thank you.
You, Nolene. We now Bishop Michael Stead and Miss Tina Kennedy as representatives of the late arrivals to provide a response.
Today is true from we're not hearing from, but okay, we've already heard from the historical records about the truth of what happened. We've just heard from Nolene about the truth of what impact that had on the Aboriginal people at that time and the continuing impact on her community and other communities as a result of that. Truth telling is that there also needs to be truth hearing. You heard it. But it's unfortunate that this we're not really hearing. How we go now. All right. Truth telling is one thing. There needs to be truth hearing. For us, as those who are gathered here today, to ignore, put the microphone down, or at least hold it. Too close. All right. Time for us to acknowledge that we have heard the truth. I'm going to invite everybody who is here today to stand, and if you are willing to, there's no have heard the truth by joining Tina and I as we lead you in this statement. Together, we make this truth-telling statement based on factual records. We publicly reject and strongly condemn this armed attack on Gweagal country. These colonising actions are unacceptable to us. They were not done in our name. We recognise the truth and we there these criminal offences against First Nations people were wrong. Thank
I hope you're going all right. You're doing your exercises with the flyers, keeping you awake and alert. It's very important. But Uncle Lindsay, I'm going to ask you to run down, just walk down, and share the next segment. I'll be with you. After a while, the flies will get tired, maybe about 5 o'clock. But until then, just persevere.
Thank you. You have just spoken in the last little while. Thank you, Nolene, for your welcome to country and your talk. In addition to that, you are always such an inspiration to hear, and we so much value walking this walk together with you. So far, the factual records we've been looking into relate to April 1770 and this location where our shared history began and the stain on our past, our colonising past, began here on that, sadly, on that very same day. It was the 28th and 29th of April, 1770. It is now the 22nd of August, 1770, and the ship is no longer at Kamay Botany Bay. They have sailed, and Cook's account explains that on the 22nd of August they were at an island in what is now called Torres Strait. That island is located just a little bit west, maybe as much as 50 kilometres west of the very tip of Cape York. Cook writes that from that location, this is filling in some of the gaps a little bit, from that location on that island, just adjacent to the tip of Cape York, Cook looked to the south and he spoke a declaration of taking possession. He writes, "I took possession of the whole eastern coast in the name of King George III of England." The whole eastern coast? Where does he mean exactly? A good question, given everything has a starting and an ending. A good question is, what does the whole eastern coast literally mean? From where to where? To cut straight to the chase and answer the question and then fill in the information, Cook was referring to 2 points, one in the north and one in the south. The one in the north was, as already stated, the island from which he indicated he was speaking when he spoke the declaration of taking possession. But what about the point in the south? Where was that? Well, when we look further and further through the journals, little clues pop up. And it is quite safe to say it was a point on the Victorian coast of Bass Strait at the very extreme eastern end of Victoria. How do we know that? Now to fill in the information. The ship had sailed to this land from New Zealand, and Seaman Hicks was the first of the crew to call land ho. And that was when he caught a glimpse of a point on the Victorian coast of Bass Strait, a land point somewhat out into the ocean. And that was the starting point from where they became aware of the mainland of this continent, and accordingly it became the point from which James Cook began to do his charting. That is, writing the first map of the entire eastern coast. A practice that he continued every day right along as they sailed north along the eastern coast. He continued until reaching Cape York, and then a little to the west, this island. That answers the question from where to where. Cook said, I took possession of lands in the name of King George III of England. Now, when we draw a straight line, you have a map there in your papers. When we draw a straight line from the island just west, now called Possession Island, from the island just west of Cape York, a straight line directly to that point in Bass Strait, now known as Point Hicks, we notice a few things. If we examine the record forensically, Cook's declaration of taking possession fell straight across in that straight line, not just the coastal beach of the eastern coast, but the land masses some distance into the continent. And that straight line falls straight across dozens of First Peoples sovereign nations. To name a few, that straight line fell across in the inland the Kararig Nation, the Gamilaroi Nation, the Wiradjuri Nation, the Yorta Yorta Nation, the Kurnai Nation, just to name a few. We see that as a first examination of that declaration spoken to the southern point from the northern position. That's the first thing we notice. It fell across those sovereign nations. The second thing we notice is those nations were a very long way inland. We're looking at, in some cases, 200 or 300 kilometres, even more if we consider, to some extent, nations in the region to the west of that line would have been most likely included in that ambit. 2 or 3, maybe 100 kilometres inland, and Cook took possession. Those nations on the inland, and here's the proof of the pudding, those nations in the inland, in addition to never having given consent to being dispossessed, those nations didn't even know the visit had happened. They didn't even know that Cook had been. And here we enter a new phase that makes the stain on our colonising past so clear. Those nations lived years and years of their lives never knowing that the future of their nations had been sealed. The future of their children and their children's children had been sealed. It had been decided. And they never knew. It had been decided by a sovereign king who lived some 17 or 18,000 kilometres away on the other side of the world. We join the records, we join the dots, we join the conclusions that one has to reach out of this, and we see the measure, the enormous depth of the wrongdoing that took place, and the stain, the deepening, growing, widening stain, ever more and more serious, that characterised our colonising beginning. It was the most egregious display of injustice, possibly the world has ever seen. Australia has failed so far to come to terms with these realities. At national leadership level, they simply will not touch it. One gets the feeling they cannot bear to look into the truth of it for several reasons. And so, for that reason, as well as many others, this day here at the place of first encounter, this truth-telling day, is yet one more step toward attempting to address the truth of our colonising past and how, just how, it began. When we understand the early factual record, it makes our journey from the earliest times, the earliest days, and how it came to be so easy to understand. Many years went by. I'm now reaching the final segment of my talk. 45 years went by. It's now 1815. We've just been speaking about 1770. In 1815, the road over the Great Dividing Range onto the Bathurst Plains on the other side of the range and Wiradjuri country. In 1815, that road was built. And when it was built, the settlers swarmed over that mountain, driving their sheep and their cattle before them, and they filled the Wiradjuri nation with their livestock, their sheep, their cattle, spread far and wide across the Wiradjuri sovereign nation homeland. And not long after, spreading to other nations around about in the region, Gamilaroi nations and so on. As it became known, the wealth that was to be had in the wonderful rolling Bathurst plains, the grassy valleys, the grassy plains, the grassy undulating hills, a flood of settlers went over that mountain. And each new wave of settlers ran past the wave that went before. And as they did, they went further and further west, taking up vast holdings of land. 100,000 acres, 50,000 acres. They extended into other nations rapidly, heading west and heading north. And this seriously disadvantaged the people who were there who belonged to country. And those people, under the leadership of warriors like Windradine, they began to resist. And when they did, that was when the massacres began. And I don't want to stand here and be the one to say what I'm going to say next. But somebody has to stand up and be counted if the truth is ever going to be known. Because if the truth does not happen and come out and become common knowledge in our country, if education does not have full sway and full swing, then justice and healing will never come. What followed the resistance by the First Nations people and the flood of settlers going over the mountain and further west was a long, long period of many decades of the stealing of land that belonged to others and the killing of the legal possessors to get it. And that is how Australia as we know it first began to take shape. That is how it was built. Finally, this story, this practice, this journey reached the very centre of Australia, the desert country, the desert people. The nations live in the Australian Central Desert country. We are so fortunate today, and I am just thrilled with joy to think that today we have a leader and a speaker who has come in to here to be with us today, having travelled all the way from Central Australia, one of the Central Desert people. And she will tell us in a few moments the story of the consequences, the story of the impact upon the people, her people of the Central Desert of Australia. We are so glad that in a moment, after I hand back to Nick and Michael, we will be hearing from Shirley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lindsay. We'd now like to invite Shirlene McLaughlin from the Ketete Arente Kerich, an Aranda woman from Central Australia. Please give her a hand.
Hello, I'm glad you're a small bunch here in Sydney. Second time to Sydney. So my name is Shirlene. Thank you for your welcome. I'm an Aranda Kadich woman from Central Australia. I don't live on my grandmother's country, Kadich country we call it, but I've been living on my grandfather's country, which is Mbarntwa, what you call Alice Springs. I live there with other dispossessed language groups, and I call that dispossessed because, you know, we're still flora and fauna in our own country, so we're cattle together, and you come there, it's a big mess. Today, there is no justice for us in the Northern Territory. The frontier wars are still there, it is still with us, and the guns are still firing. It is that ridiculous that they are locking up our kids as young as 10 years old. They're sending them up to a detention centre in Darwin that is now full to the brim, with no intentions of releasing them back to their communities. I know this because I work at the courts in Alice Springs. The origin of the youth crime wave in Mbarantwa Alice Springs has its direct origins and is one of the catastrophic consequences of the massacres. More of this truth-telling I'll be telling you with Hazel, especially to do with Barrow Creek, my grandmother's country. Thank you.
Thank you, my sister. And we feel for you and all the people all over across this great land of the impacts of local colonisation, but still impacting where Aboriginal people have no decision making, no power to protect our children in some cases, to lead our communities. And so as we talk about the past, we know that the impact is still current today. So you could say in a sense colonisation is a continual thing that impacts the Aboriginal community because the fruits of what was done still continue today. And when we look for justice for our community and hope and healing, and it is a struggle. It hurts. But we know that the grace of God, it is sufficient, yet it still hurts when you are harmed by those on this earth, in this planet. So we know we've got the hope of God, that through Christ we are walking into his kingdom through the blood of Jesus. At the same time, we still suffer and hurt. And Jesus told us that he suffered and we will also suffer. So my encouragement is that through these challenging times, we cling near and dear to our Lord, and that he gives us the patience, perseverance, the grace, mercy and compassion, and that is hard sometimes. But as we draw near to God, he enables us that strength to persevere, and sometimes you can't even see the light coming. But Blackfellas have been just, we are resilient, and we've demonstrated that for generations upon generations, and we pass on to our children and our children's children to continue to persevere and to hope in God, who is our refuge, our strength, our deliverer. That's what we have the promises of in God's word. So we hold on to that. But now we're going to again invite our family up to lead us in this next segment of All in Unison. We all wave the flies away, and if you haven't had a fly up your nose and in your ear yet, it will happen. So come on down.
I invite everyone to stand. The historical records have told us the truth about the taking of possession. We've been told the truth about the impact of dispossession. Dispossession at that time, the dispossession that continues to be a fact of our history and is a continuing fact right across our country to this day. We've been told the truth. Have we heard the truth? I invite you to join with me in this declaration. We make this truth-telling statement based on factual records. We publicly reject and strongly condemn this taking possession of many lands without consent. These colonising actions are unacceptable to us. They were not done in our name. We recognise the truth and we hereby declare this taking possession of lands without consent was wrong. Thank you. Please be seated.
We're now going to move on to wrongdoing 3. the sending of the first fleet without consent. So I'd like to invite Philip Heath from Barker College to come up here. And as he's coming up, just want to acknowledge that education has been a really key part of this act of recognition movement. It's not only about declaring, but how we educate those in the next generation and make sure these stories and this history continues to be told. So as principal of Barker College, we'd like to thank Philip for coming up and being that representation as well.
Thank you, everybody. It's a considerable honour to be here. I do want to acknowledge the Gweagal people and thank you for your welcome, which is entirely undeserved. We are very grateful to you for that extraordinary quality amongst our Indigenous people that despite generations of untold hurts, you still welcome. And that is an example to us all. I'm putting some elaborate props because I'm an educator and it's good to learn with things and look at images as we do. I'm Philip Heath. I'm head of Barker College. I'm number 9 in that long line of a school that started in 1890. But I recognise that there are people in this place whose history is so much longer than that. I see Uncle Ray, and we have some history, don't we, Ray? Some 20 years ago nearly, Ray and I established a school for Aboriginal children in the centre of Sydney called Gweagal, and it's still there and flourishing. In the years that followed that, in 2007, in 2016, with Sean Gordon, I started the Darkinjung School for Aboriginal children north of the harbour, north of the Hawkesbury River, that in partnership with the school at Barker. Some years later than that, started another one in Wollombi. That's not Darkinjung country, but Wanneroo country, just to the north. Again, how do we close the gap? What an outrageous term, the gap. The gap is really from us. The gap is in our hearts and in our knowledge of this country. But if you want to look at it from a white perspective, how do we close the gap before it opens? And that's get the education right. With people, country, community, the parents, and the cultural story of the children at the very heart of what we're doing. And then more dramatically, which is why I put these props here, some little time ago in 2021 with Yunupingu, who passed away a few years ago, we started the Dupama, or restarted the Dupama school in northeast Arnhem Land. And so if I was to introduce myself from a Ballender, that is to say a white fella perspective, I would say I'm Philip Heath. I grew up in the south coast of New South Wales. I moved to Sydney to work, and I've had the great joy and privilege of leading several schools in that journey with a strongly Christian heritage. But if I was up in northeast Arnhem Land, from which I have just come, I was up there throughout this week, they would say Gulalu Bukmak, in the words of the Yolngu people in Yolngu welcome to all. And they would introduce me, because I've been adopted into the Yunupingu family, they would say that my skin name is Gudjuk. My given Indigenous name is Ganbalalpala, and that's this character depicted on this hat. Ganbalalpala, the great story of the provider looking up. If Cook had moved from Possession Island and sailed a little bit further along the Torres Strait, he might have found the Yolngu people. The Yolngu people were never bested by any European nation. Their first contact was with Macassans, and some of that language has entered their language, and so the word for money in Yolngu is rupia. And their word for whitefella is not British or English, it's Ballender, which is a corruption of Hollander, the Dutch. Who owns this country? Who are these first people? From whence comes this great story of this extraordinary land? With Uncle Ray, we started Gweagal, and one of the first children who came to us at Gweagal in 2007 was a little boy called Ethan in kindergarten, Ethan Ariel Landy. Faith, his mother, decided that education was going to be the key that unlocked the future. We all believe that in our hearts, don't we? It's one of the great privileges that I have in my work, to be touching the future every day. And Ethan and his brother Tavanahu loved the school and did really well, did their very best. For a few years he dropped out of schooling. I went to Canberra and I had the great joy of leading Radford College. Thank you, Bishop, for being here today. And then made my way back to Barker, and would you believe, a few years later, by the time Ethan was in year 9, he tracked me down again. I've been out of school for a while, he said. I've been trying my best. I want to come to school again. Can I come to your school? Of course. Ethan finished year 12 in 2019, and his gift to me and to the school was this beautiful image, which I've rendered into a tie. And I want to share it as I share the third wrongdoing. It tells a story, this tie. It's not merely an object. It's actually a portion of a 20 by 10 meter mural that I've just taken and tried to create a picture out of. Pictures tell us stories. First Nation Australians shared deep knowledge with these stories, and in sharing this with you, I now place this on your heart. You don't just get to hear this as a story, it actually becomes your responsibility because I'm sharing it with you. If you hear it and listen to it, it carries weight on your soul. Be careful as you listen. It tells the story of the Western Desert people, from whence comes some part of Ethan's family. And the Torres Strait Islander people, do you see it there? Saltwater people and the desert people. Two different stories weaving together. And they found their way down to the coast of Eastern Australia and into a school that we started, young Ray and I, called Gweagal, the Gadigal word for whale. The beautiful picture of the breaching whale that Colin Davis did for us, that is still the symbol of that school, reminding us of the strength and endurance and beauty of the natural world around us and the extraordinary story of the whale and its survival. And in this story comes the third space. Can you see it? The campground, the gathering place, the connecting place where we listen and talk and respect each other's stories. Two stories have come together into a third story that has its own unique power and authenticity. To think of it as salt water and fresh water coming together in a third space that creates a nutrient-filled environment from which life can flourish without losing the authenticity of the first two. That's our challenge. That's our challenge in this country. And we can't do that challenge without knowing the truth. We can't do that without honouring the past and recognising, yes, with regret and sadness and deep apology, what has happened. Here in this place, just behind me, Arthur Phillip came with 1,400 people. They could never have argued that they did not know it was a land already occupied. No rational person could understand the thought of terra nullius. With all the evidence, as Cook sailed north, he saw campfires all the way up the coast. No doubt they were managing country. And he saw it and recorded that. They knew. In fact, Arthur Phillip's instructions were to live peacefully with the people that he met. And we know the story. 1,400 people who were desperate for their own survival, whose own lives in Europe were desperately bad, were sent out here against their will, if you will, a kind of version of slavery, to establish a colony in order to stop other European countries doing so. and forming a beachhead in the South Pacific that became so important. We were tied up with these global issues that had no regard for the first people. And as we've been reminded, these ghosts appeared out of the ships. Now, when I'm up in northeast Arnhem Land, they've never seen anything as white as me and still alive. It's an astonishing thing that they've given me a name and an identity. I've got a totem up there, it's the baru, the crocodile. My surname up there is Yunupingu, and I'm treated as such. And there are rights and obligations that go with that. I have responsibilities. They've called me Ganbalalpala. That's a big name, the name of the person looking up. And that school, Dupama, started in 1972, and Billy McMahon, the Australian Prime Minister at the time, was the person who opened the school in 1972. The Yunupingu family and the Wangara family and many of those other significant families from northeast Arnhem Land sent their children to that school. Now, why that's become important is because just a few years before that school opened, the Bark Petition was given to the Australian Parliament by those families. By those families. And they thought, how do we communicate with people who won't listen to us? We know the answer. We'll speak their language. We'll do a petition. But we'll do it on bark. And it's there in the Australian Parliament now. You can go and see it. And those families, whose great-grandchildren are with me at Dupama, the refounded Dupama. And I went up there to see the families and to talk to the teachers and to establish a building that is worthy of the name school, which we will open on the 10th of December. 58 children are going to school. And we have a families as first teachers, you know, FAFT. We're very proud of our FAFT. We have about 40 families who come to FAFT, mothers with their babies on the knee. Reconciliation is not words, it's the heart. And what Jesus tells us is that true religion is actually the setting of things to right, seeking justice, looking after the oppressed, finding a voice for those who have no voice, caring for the widows and the dispossessed. The wounded, the sick, the disabled are part of our responsibility. We have done that in this land. We have created the wounding. It's time for us to reconcile, not with words or even political statements, but with actions. Close the gap before it opens and unite this country into a coherent, safe, and beautiful third way without denying the first two, full of nutrients, full of richness. Two other quick thoughts as I close. Just this week, the native title was returned in Cape York. Some 900,000 hectares of land was given back to the first people, some 200 and however many years after Captain Cook declared it to be part of the British Crown. And here we are at Kurnell today, at the first landing place. There's a beautiful symmetry about that. In 1838, 50 years after the establishment of the colony, the Mile Creek Massacre brought about the first prosecution of white atrocities. The first one, not the first one recorded, but the first one prosecuted. It caused a rift in this town. Young John Saunders, the Baptist minister who had just arrived in the colony, observed these things and preached a sermon, which you can find very clearly still published, and it's in the record, where he asked the questions, were the first people of this country human? Were they endowed with God-given gifts the same way as everybody else? Were they blessed with the soul? Were they in relationship with the Creator? And he came back with the emphatic yes. 50 years after the establishment of the colony, perhaps 250 years after the establishment of the colony, perhaps there are still some people in this country asking that question. And we know the answer. My solemn responsibility as an educator is to never rest until the truth is told. To not grow up in an Australia with amnesia the way I did, but to tell the truth and make sure we know what happened and can create a third space not on the basis of fiction or romance, but on the basis of truth. Here endeth the lesson.
So we are now continue to move on to having an input by the wrong parties, the voice of First Peoples. It says here they must be heard. We've got Uncle Ray Menacon, Uncle Ozzy Cruz, they're going to share. And I just want to recognise, acknowledge that my uncles here, who are my seniors, they've lived a life experiencing a whole range of policies from the governments, a whole range of churches' approaches to our people. And the fact is that too often churches have ignored my people, treated us disrespectfully or not well. And we went on a journey. My uncle's been leading this path fighting forever. And I come on as a young fella trying to see a day where Aboriginal people will be able to lead the work of God our way, to be free to determine their path.
We're doing here today. That is the challenge which today lies before us. To live that out must be the focus of our lives. I will pay my vows in the presence of his people. Now, there are a million sermons in this little text that was first preached on this soil back there in 1788. Very first time they opened the book. And the text is founded in justice. At its heart, the text asks the question, it assumes the question, what is justice? For Johnson, the result of English justice, a system that met out British justice to its criminal citizens, was there before him in 1788. But there is another congregation here at this church gathering, hiding beyond the trees, looking in from the rocks and the trees, beyond the unspoken perimeter of that church service, were the Gadigal people, whose lives would be irrevocably affected by the arrival of the First Fleet. Hidden by trees and rocks, many of the Gadigal people would have watched the ceremony, uncomprehending, unaware yet how much the unannounced and unnegotiated arrival of these people would change their lives forever, and how much it marked so drastic a change in the lives of all of Australia's First Nations peoples. The first church service. The whites gathered around this book. The Aboriginal people were on the outside. Some of us still asking what's changed. The sermon was delivered in a completely foreign language to the local Gadigal people. It was quoted from a completely foreign book. Even the book that was quoted wasn't their book or their story. I wonder why our old people used to say, Jesus didn't get off the first fleet boat there. He was already here. And today that book is still spoken in a foreign building. We don't have a church that we can call our home after 200 and so years. We don't have a building. We don't have a cathedral. And still delivered in a foreign language, we still are marginalised by the buildings and the book. Later on, the book was used also as a weapon against us. No payment for land, no sign of an agreement with the land with us. And there they were, stuck with these prisoners for the rest of our lives. And we have no means of protection, even though it is our basic rights. So this text on that monument there in Johnson Square I encourage you to go and sit there and contemplate this particular moment in Australia's history. Because it stands there like a sentinel. It's a witness to what happened to the Gadigal people. And to us who are trying our hardest to fit into these foreign systems and structures. So this ancient text sits at the foundation statement of this land and asks the question, what is justice? What can I give in exchange for all of his benefits towards us? This is what our people are asking. We look at it and we say, look, these were the convicts sent here as punishment for their petty crimes. These people did not know how to care for their own people, let alone us. And the powers and structures and the orders that they were sent here for was to punish, was to control, was to rehabilitate. Could they escape? Where to? Could they swim to New Zealand? This nation, we must remember, was started as a jailhouse, a penal colony, a place of torture and punishment of its own citizens. So uncivilized. And we were not included in the policy of punishment yet. That changed very rapidly. So it's like someone who forcibly invaded and broke into your home without your consent, setting up a jail in your home and using your home as a holding cell for prisoners out of Long Bay Jail. You have no power to evict them. They're implementing their own barbaric laws and customs. If we interfered, we too were punished along with the convicts. Eventually, they needed more land, and they assumed that we wouldn't mind if they took more. And besides, we have no answer or response to their superior weapons. Besides, as we know, they made another declaration that this is terra nullius. No one lives here, even though we threw spears at them and all that. Terra nullius, no one lives here. The most sacred laws of justice are therefore non-existent, and we are rendered in their own country impotent and powerless. And so the text asks this deep question: what is justice? What could I render unto the Lord for all of his benefits towards me? There is a character in Socrates, Plato, the Republic, one of my favourite characters, and his name's Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus had this view against views that Plato calls him a sophist, a professional itinerant teacher of rhetoric and persuasion. But this is Thrasymachus's definition of what justice is. Listen to it, because it seems to resonate some truisms with me. He said that Plato, justice is in the advantage to the advantage of the stronger. Meaning, justice is simply what the ruling class or the powerful decide is beneficial for them. In this view, the laws and the rules of society are created by those in power to maintain their own position, and what is called justice is simply obedience to those laws. Don't tell the Yanks about this. The advantage of the stronger. This is the most famous articulation of his view. Famously stated as justice is nothing other than the advantage of the stronger. Don't tell those Aboriginal people either. And so justice is obedience to their law. So when we look at this particular history again, of this gathering of 700 people around this person, this individual, reading from a book there in Warang, Circular Quay. Let's reflect on the words of Psalm 116 from an Indigenous perspective. What shall I render unto the Lord for all of his benefits to me? What would we focus on? And from an Aboriginal perspective, we would focus on the profound connection that we have with our land, our culture, and our spirituality. For us, the land is sacred. In our Aboriginal worldview, the land is not merely a geographical space, it's a sacred entity that has been given to us by the Creator. Our spiritual connection to the land is profound as it provides sustenance and shelter and spiritual nourishment. Just as the psalmist wondered how to render thanks to the Lord, Aboriginal people have pondered how to reciprocate the gift of the land that our Creator has given us. And so we have deep gratitude for the land. The Aboriginal perspective encourages us to be thankful for the land, for its resources, the spiritual sustenance it provides. We are stewards of the lands, the waters, the oceans, and all the grass and animals and everything that's in it. This leads to gratitude for us to care for it and protect it. And as we saw here in parts of our totem, help us to connect to that. So we are so thankful, but we are also environmentally, we have to, like we say in our acknowledgement, the custodians of the land. We show our environmental stewardship. In Aboriginal cultures, there is a deep-rooted sense of responsibility to protect the land and its ecosystems. I often say at these big climate justice things that, and our people there at the centre will also know this, before an Aboriginal child reaches the age of 12 or younger, they already have a PhD in environmental science. They already have a PhD in astronomy. They have all these PhDs before they're 12 years old. We know the land. We know how to look after it. We know how to care for it. We've been doing it for 60,000 years, goodness gracious me. We had to pass that on to our children. And so when they come out of that education system, ours, and goes into this one here, we sometimes scratch our heads and say, what are you talking about? So one day, you'll catch up with our educational system and start to teach from that particular perspective. And Aboriginal cultures are rich and diverse, embodying unique traditions and languages and spiritual practices, including smoking ceremonies. And these cultures are intrinsically linked to the land and reflect the Creator's wisdom and diversity. Like I said before, this text, if you go down to that obelisk there in Johnson Square, I encourage you to do so. It's like a sentinel to this country. It's like a voice to this country. It's like a loudspeaker. And it's also a witness to what happened to our people. It's an ancient text to contemplate, to reflect, and encourage us to be in fellowship and partnership, knowing who we are in Christ, knowing that we can dream together, knowing what we can be and what we can achieve together, fully comprehensive of the knowledge that with God all things are possible. I'll conclude with these thoughts and invite Uncle Oz to come up. As we reflect on Psalm 116 verse 12, it is the text for Australia. What shall I render unto the Lord for all of his benefits towards us? This is God's question to all of us. From an Aboriginal perspective, let us remember the sacredness of the land and the richness of our cultures. In gratitude to the Creator, we continue to care for the land, embrace our cultural heritage, and find harmony between our faith in Christ and our Indigenous traditions. So may our journey be one of reconciliation, one of healing, of truth-telling, unity, guided by the spirit of love, respect and gratitude for all that the Creator has bestowed upon us in this country. What shall I render unto the Lord for all of his benefits towards us? Maybe we can answer this in the psalm again and go to verse 14 and say, I will pay my vows to the Lord in the presence of his people. We were given that opportunity in 2023. Maybe we're looking for other opportunities. Thank you.
Well, I didn't write a speech just as well. I'll be here all day. But, but I just wanted to say, pardon me, you know, it's tremendous to be here with so many different people and from all different cultures. I love that, the point of view where we say we are one. We are many nations. We come from many nations. But in Australia, we are one. And that's what I wanted to talk about, the very fact that, you know, we can blame the First Fleet for doing lots of things wrong. But one of the things that I often think about, and you know, the First Fleet, it brought to us a nation of people. We came from many countries ourselves. My ancestry goes back to America, to the American Indians, you know, to the Native Americans. That's where my ancestry goes back there. And I know that in caring and sharing, as we are as a people, is the responsibility we have. We want to need to raise our children with a voice of harmony. We want to see our children grow up in peace and love. And I know the verse of scripture that tells me, love your neighbor as you love each other. And so that we want to put that to praxis. You can make speeches. You can say things that wants everybody to hear. And you can do many things that everybody is approval of. But the fact is, when we come to the point of love your neighbor as yourself, that's what we need to put into practice, all of us as a people. We are Australians. We are one. And we are one people. And I like to think too, you know, that I've done my part to make that nation appreciate the very fact. Please take these flies away. They're driving me crazy. But it's one of the things we have to put up with in our country. We are, particularly here, where the there's a lot of cattle and so in this country. And so it is, you know, that when I am to talk about the wronged parties and the voice of the people. Well, I've been doing it for many years, listening to the voice of the people and presenting the voice of the people. And that's in my first years that I ever had the opportunity to do that. I was on the first Aboriginal Advisory Council appointed in New South Wales. And then I had to go to the people and to say to them, I'm to represent you. How do I do that best? And you know, when you find a lot of beautiful people in this world, and particularly in our nation, there's a lot of beautiful people. And when you talk with them, and you must talk, I can see this, you know, that the nation was taken without consent in big letters. But we've got to think about what did happen when our nation was taken over. And we know that we'd be still walking around, walking through the bush. But now we drive a car today. That's the difference. And when you think about the times that we need to look at what took place without consent. Well, I want to give consent to the people. I want to say to them, we are one people. We have children growing up behind us. We want them the best that we can give them. And that's what we have to work at. Look at our next nation that's coming up. There are leaders there amongst our people and our children. And we want them to have the best interests provided for them. So that they do, well, they'll be able to make the voice and they can speak right. And in my title here, the wronged parties. Yeah, well, I know that we probably go in our political parties. We have a lot of differences of opinions, don't we, as a people? And we know that there are many different ways that we want our best interests to be carried out in this country. But I say to you, and I say to all people, look at our next generation. What do we want to leave them? What sort of a country do we want our children to grow up in? And how best we can contribute to that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Ray and Uncle Ozzy. We'd now like to invite Michael and Tina up again for the response.
Please stand. The factual records of our history tell us about 3 wrongdoings. They tell us about an armed entry into country. They tell us about a taking of possession without consent. They tell us of the colonising actions of the First Fleet. We've been told by our Indigenous brothers and sisters of the impact of these wrongdoings. We've been told the truth. Have we heard? I invite you to join with us in this pledge. We have heard you. We do not want to leave you to struggle on your own. We want to stand with you. We want to struggle with you. And we make this truth-telling statement based on factual records. We publicly reject and strongly condemn the sending of 11 ships and 1,400 people without consent. These colonising actions are unacceptable to us. They were not done in our name. We recognise the truth and we hereby declare this colonising action against First Nations people was wrong. Please be seated.
So the story goes on and the flyers continue. We're cruising pretty good, you know. If you're still awake, that's pretty good, you know. Congratulations. Can I say, if you are weary from shaking away with the flyers, we have water at the back. So if you need a bit of sustenance and a bit of water, please grab some because we've got another 5 hours to go. No, we don't. Don't stress. No, we don't. But if you are thirsty, please feel free to grab some because we don't want people fainting on us, you know. So now we move on to point 7, the ongoing story. And we have here Hazel Davies. Come on down. Oh, and sorry, and Shirley, that's the tag team. Well done. Oh, beautiful.
My sister Shirlene and I are going to share this testimony together. We've been walking together in Central Desert for a while. I'm Hazel Davies. I'm a white woman of British heritage. I was born on Dharawal country near Appin, where the first sanctioned massacres took place in 1816. And like most of us white fellas, I discovered a long way into my life, well after my formal education, that the truth of our history lay buried and, for me, had been deliberately hidden as I grew up. I'm a professional florist and teacher of 46 years, and for 45 years I've been assisting people across Australia on a voluntary basis to create commemorative tributes for those who have suffered loss and grief in war and in other tragedies, for those who died for country under the poppy, and for those who died on country. And I work closely with Auntie Beverly O'Callaghan, a Mbandua woman from the Mpembe tribe, and help her to get her story of the bloodflower desert pea out across Australia to schools so we can get talking about remembering those who died on country. Here's my Shirlene.
So I'd like to continue with the story of the massacre that took place on my grandmother's country, Barrow Creek. I was born in 1974 from the descendants of George and Mompy Hayes from Barrow Creek. The story of the killings was told to me by my grandmother, Emily Mbajana Hayes. Pastor Ray Winnikin was at my grandmother's funeral. He helped us bury her there, so thank you. Just want to acknowledge you there. She told me and my brothers and sisters a lot of stories. She told us who we were as Indigenous people to our lands. We grew up knowing our stories, our totems, our everything. She was everything. But the main thing that stuck with me and my brothers and sisters was the stories that 70 men, women and children were pushed off the hills on her country. And she told it as if it was yesterday. Today we are still grieving our loved ones who were massacred on our land, the Kadich country. We have never ever been recognised or commemorated for these killings. My family and I continue to live with the ongoing trauma and injury today. Everything Hazel and I bring to you today can be found in public, historic and legal records and incorporates reliable and published oral renditions of events. Some of you may find the contents distressing.
It was a terrible time in Australia's history. A killing rampage that has been described as the deadliest mass shooting in our national story. A black day for our nation. The sheer scale of it was horrendous, and the scars linger for those who were there. On the 28th of April 1996, at approximately 1 o'clock, a gunman walked into the Broad Arrow Cafe at the historic Port Arthur district. He was heard to say, "There are a lot of wasps here today," and some would later surmise that he was using an acronym for White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Port Arthur already had a dark past, involving the displacement and suffering of Aboriginal people as part of the colonisers' Black Line campaign of genocide and forced removal from country. Ironically, this made way for our own colonial tragedy of convict labour and oppression from 1830 to 1877. But on this Sunday, 119 years later, 20 people were gunned down in the cafe and another 15 nearby. 21 lay injured. There are stories of loved ones dying as they tried to shield their own from the bullets. My husband Owen and I know some of these people. 6-year-old Alana, 3-year-old Madeline Macaque, together with their mother Nanette, taken. Unspeakable, unthinkable. We reel. As a nation, we reacted swiftly. We unified. The killings led to immediate sweeping changes in our gun laws. 800,000 firearms were given up, destroyed in buybacks and amnesties. The Alana and Madeline Foundation was born to fight for the right of children to never face this kind of violence again. If you go to Port Arthur today, you'll find a sacred space. The shell of the Broad Arrow Cafe has been deliberately kept. An intentional but partial demolition. Its ruins have been left as a reminder of the truth, but have given us a space for reflection and healing and release. Beyond the pool, a cross stands, bearing the names of the victims. They are named. They are held. They are remembered. It was said at the time that Australians would go on to be typified and personified by the decency that resulted from the Port Arthur killings, despite the horror, and rightly so.
So Barra Creek, the untold story of Coniston. On the 15th of August 1928, the first of reprisal killings linked to the death of a stockman at Coniston Station took place on my country. The Unmatjada people at Barra Creek, 280 kilometres north of Alice Springs, and lasted through to the 18th of October. Mounted Constable George Murray was a light horseman of the 4th Regiment in World War I and an original Anzac at Gallipoli. In 1919, he joined the NT Police, and in 1926, he was transferred to the Barra Creek Police Station, where he was given the title of Protector of Aborigines. In 1928, he was ordered to investigate the killing of the rabbit hunter at Coniston. Although officially instructed to avoid violence, it was widely understood. He was to teach Aboriginal people a lesson from Coniston. A group of settlers were recruited to carry out a series of punitive raids, killing many of my people unconnected to the Coniston incident 250 kilometres to the west of Barra Creek. Murray himself admitted to killing 31 people, though later estimates to claim up to 100 deaths of women, children, men that occurred over the period by the Salt Group. The matter went to trial on the 7th and 8th of November in 1928 before Justice Mallam, sitting at the Supreme Court of the Northern Territory in Darwin. During the trial, Murray freely admitted to shooting many Aboriginal people that he shot to kill rather than wound. So in brackets, so you mowed them down wholesale? Asked Judge Mallam. Murray replied, what's the use of a wounded blackfella hundreds of miles from civilization? Topsy Glynn, an Mbajana woman, and a child at the time is recorded as saying, she and her mother were dancing and singing around the fire east of Barrow Creek, when out of the darkness men had appeared on horseback, bringing with them death and destruction. Remember, this is 1928, not long ago. Much was her mother's distress in the telling and her own in the hearing that details of the storytelling night remained blurred. After they speared that mob at Coniston, they came down this way, she said, Barra Creek Telegraph Station. Police came over, weeks, they shoot them, a lot of them, Kadich mob, Anmatjira mob, a Walpri mob. Topsy found it extraordinary that everyone talks about the Coniston killings, but not the big mob that died later on the east side. By date and size, the Barra Creek events are the last known and most serious, officially sanctioned massacres of Indigenous Australians, one of hundreds that dot the country.
Later, Constable Murray would be acquitted, with the court accepting his actions as self-defence. A public inquiry was held into the findings, but the trial's justifications were upheld. The centenary of this great sorrow and milestone in Australia is approaching in 2028. How will we respond? Only 50 years ago, Murray passed away at the end of a long life on the 2nd of December 1975, in the lifetime of many of us here. We can reach out and touch this history. And so can his descendants, who were very much included at the Coniston Station Memorial in a spirit of mutual forgiveness and recognition and grace. So there's an end to that bit. Shirlene's family tell her firsthand of the atrocity on her country and the pain that followed.
If you go to this place on my country, near Barra Creek, today you will find nothing but dust devils and mirages dance in the wind along the ravines of the cliff, where once nearby my people were forced to the edge and jumped to their death rather than face the bullet. So it's written that they pushed off 70 men, women and children off the hills. 20 kilometres south at the Barra Creek Hotel, amongst the rusty cans, rebuilt posters and old number plates, you'll find a tattered and yellowed article telling the story of the massacre. There is a memorial there. 2 graves surrounded by a white picket fence. Travellers along the Stewart Highway stop to pay their respects and leave flowers. But it's not a memorial to the men, women and children who died at Barra Creek.
It's a memorial to the 2 telegraph station workers, with an inscription that reads, killed by natives, 1874. But dig a little deeper and you learn that the telegraph station was built around a sacred waterhole, the only drinking water for the Kadich in 120 k's, and that their local women were being abused and assaulted. We remember James L. Stapleton, station master, and John Franks lineman, where we forget the story that the colonial authorities responded with multiple punitive expeditions. The numbers who fell at Skull Creek and Taylor Creek at that time are unknown, but as in the Coniston series, many innocent people were swept away in the violence. Bring me a bushfire. Bring me a flood, the Bali bombing. Bring me any national tragedy in this land. Bring me to any war memorial across Australia in the freezing dawn or the searing heat. And there you'll find us, remembering all who fell, clutching our blood flower, the Flanders poppy. When COVID stole our Anzac ceremonies, we hurried to the end of our driveways to light a candle and stand together in solidarity. Because you could close all the airports and all the public institutions, and you could even close the borders. But you could not close our collective mouths when it came to our national cradle oath, lest we forget. For we are a people fluent in memorial. We will carry the symbols and sacraments of our sorry business to any representative space we can find. Because, speaking as a white fella, our own killing fields are far across the sea. Because it's considered, and I was taught, it's un-Australian to forget the fallen, to forget any victim. And because I think, honestly and frankly, we couldn't bear the thought that it might have happened to us or one of our own. And God forbid, because what would it be like if strangers came across the seas and took over our country? Yes, I will say it again, we are a people fluent in the language of memorial. And I borrow from Richard Flanagan, but we are also a people of great perversity. We are an ancient country that insists on thinking of itself as new. We are a modern nation that insists our recent arrangements are so time-honoured that they can never be changed. We have turned our back on the profound and disturbing truths of our history again and again, because to acknowledge it is to acknowledge another far greater truth about Australia, that the prosperity of these contemporary lands was built on the destruction of countless lives, those who died for country and those who died on country. That you and I live and move and have our being on the backs of those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. We must ask why. If we are so genuine about remembering our patriots who've died overseas for this country, why we should not first have a national day, place and time to remember those who tragically lost their lives defending their own country here in Australian fields, on Australian soil. The challenge that faces us, the grave and terrifying challenge, is to transform ourselves as a people. It is to realise that if we don't create for ourselves a liberating vision founded in the full truth of who we are as Australians, we will continue to stumble forward in the dark, not knowing where we came from or the way forward.
But there is hope. I have to laugh, because if you don't laugh, you cry. For small sparks of truth-telling are igniting like this one today in our land. There are those who are leading the way, like Hazel, with the Desert Pea. On both the sovereign First Nations and settler sides of history, time will not permit us to tell of the everyday heroes who have begun to crack open the great forgetting code to raise up memorial signals in places like Mile Creek, Appin, Pinjarra, Coniston. They will go down in history as coalitions of the willing, brave people who pushed against the tide of forgetfulness. Director of the Australian War Memorial, Dr. Brendan Nelson,
said in 2013 and on other occasions, the story of the Frontier Wars are better placed in a museum and are beyond the remit of the Australian War Memorial. But public feedback convinced him to change his mind. And we have heard that he began to quietly advocate for the inclusion of the history and narrative of the Australian Frontier Wars in the now $582 million extension and refurbishment of the Australian War Memorial. By 2013, the situation had changed. The Australian War Memorial had done an about-face, but it had a long way to go. It was announced that the War Memorial must cover the Frontier Wars if it was to tell the full story of Australia's history. Said Kim Beazley, we must give the Aboriginal people the dignity of resistance. Guerrilla-type activity around the country by Indigenous people resisting what they saw as an invasion. It was a good first step. But we must ask, where is the national symbolic resting place? We have with us today an esteemed pioneer of this space, and I honour Professor Gilla Michael Anderson, who has blazed a trail for many to follow, a great leader and a mentor to many. My respects. I've observed that since 2015, wreaths have been laid by Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians on Anzac Day at the War Memorial to commemorate the Frontier Wars. And that story continues. Just recently, I heard some of those wreaths were taken into collections by the Australian War Memorial under Australian official war heraldry, and they read the Australian Frontier Wars. But where does this common act belong? One thing I do know is that it belongs on all our lips and in all our hearts and at the end of all our driveways. Not as a confession of guilt, we've heard that, but in a spirit of recognition of the understanding that we tread with care on a land that was taken against the will of its original inhabitants, a land of beauty rich and rare, usurped by others who came from across the sea. The boats landed here, and our forebears did what they did. It can't be undone, but we can walk in the dignity of knowing that we tread softly upon the sacred places of so many, the young and the old.
So let us pause and reflect now. The frontier wars must end. But for my people, the guns are still firing on my country. They've declared war on our kids. These voices are in the wind. Let us stop for one sacred moment and listen to their ancient wisdom. Let us move forward. We have to look after our next generation. They are our leaders. And let us prepare a place for them now.
I'm going to just stop for a minute now.
We will remember them,
Lest
lest forget.
Shortly, Shirlene with Nolene will go down during the lunch hour to lay a wreath for her people at the James Cook Memorial.
you, Hazel and Shirlene. I'd like now to invite the people who are going to read out the pledge up to the front.
So a few people on each side. Hazel, would you like to come up? So we here, the later Australians, the white fellas, would like to say the words of this pledge that we have put together. We hope, in the hope that we will lead the way for other Australians to take this on board, and that it will be a part of the restoration that Ray spoke about. So, today, we who are later Australians stand here at Kamay Botany Bay, where the stain on our colonising past began. Speaking for ourselves alone and for no one else, we recognise and take ownership of the wrongdoing of those who came and imposed profound injustice and deep harm on the First Nations peoples.
We acknowledge the result of this wrong beginning has been loss of land, loss of life and of culture, with ongoing trauma from one generation to the next.
We believe the time has come for the truth to be told to the nation. Truths that are recorded in the journals from the ship Endeavour, held in the National Library of Australia, and truths that are told and handed down through the generations of First Nations oral histories and stories.
Here today, we pledge to fully declare the truth, to faithfully work towards justice, and to be agents of healing in this struggle to recognise the wrongs of the past and to make things right for all Australians.
We'll now get Michael and Tina back up to do the final declaration of recognition before we close.
I invite everyone to stand. Each of us will respond in different ways to all the things that we've heard today. I'm responding both with just such a deep sense of grief at the past and also a sense of hope for the future. However you are responding, we invite those who are willing to join with us as we make this declaration of recognition today. We say together, we gather at the place where our shared history began, Kamay Botany Bay. Though we speak of untold loss and grief, yet also we are filled with gratitude for what we have found in each other. We see the many fair-minded people who live on all these lands. We see First Nations people who have generously shown love and forgiveness. We see later Australians who, seeing truth, labour to make wrong things right. And yet we know that the heart of our nation is disturbed. At the heart of our nation there lies a profound injustice and a deep divide. It is a divide between the descendants of those who were here and those who came. First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples became oppressed. On our first day of shared history, an armed attack was launched against them. Tall ships came from the sea and other people overran country. Belonging to country, First Peoples were dispossessed of their homelands. Elders looked and saw old people displaced, no place of belonging. They looked and saw language forbidden, culture, identity, all lost. Young lives broken by intergenerational trauma, lives over before they began. The time has come to recognise the truth about European arrival in this land. The voice of First Peoples must be heard, and the voice of all people of goodwill heard with them. With this declaration of recognition, we enter the truth-telling space together. We declare that at this place we recognise the truth, the stains on our past. We publicly reject and strongly condemn these colonising actions. They are not acceptable to us. They were not done in our name. We celebrate a truth that binds us together, the truth of our common humanity. We commit to walking together in our resolve to making wrong things right. Please be seated.
Before we share our lunch with the flies, that's going to be great. So I have little bites and quickly. I just want to close in prayer because when I hear the heartache of all people, the first point is to come before God and ask Him to have mercy upon us, forgive us of our sins, to cleanse us from all unrighteousness so that we may love and serve those, our neighbour. So my challenge to us is what we've heard today, may it stir us, drive us. The love of God compels us to love. And sometimes that means picking up an old blackfella off the road there and sitting with him and having a feed with him. Sometimes it means making us uncomfortable for the sake of loving somebody else. But sacrifice is not comfortable. We learned that when our Lord laid His life down, that He did it with joy. That's what we get to do the same, a joy of serving, sacrificing and blessing those of this land who are custodians of this land. How you do it, that's your business, but be willing to do it somehow, some way, through a kind word, a kind gesture, a welcoming heart, a sitting with the people, walking with the people. Any relationship with Aboriginal people must be a heartbeat to a heartbeat. It can't be through a text, can't be through an email. It's got to be a heart to a heart, face to face. So let me pray, and then we shall eat. Father God, we pause. We hear the birds singing that remind us of your majesty, of your holiness, your glory. We see the beauty of this land here that testifies to your majesty. Dear Father, we've heard words and accounts that have been very stirring, heartfelt, shameful. Father, please forgive us. Father, may you cleanse us from all unrighteousness. May you drive us to live a life of love and patience and kindness and mercy, that we may demonstrate to others that we are yours by the way we love them, the way we treat them. May we follow the example of Jesus Christ. He says, forgive them for they know not what they do. And we've seen a lot of dark things done to our people. We've seen a lot of evil. Oh, Father, we know that you're the judge, and you'll send your Son to judge all. And we can rest in that, knowing that people will be held accountable. But for us today who've heard, may we doers of your word. May we take what we've heard and translate that into action, some way that would be bringing justice to the people of this land, bringing hope and healing in the name of Jesus Christ, that our women are safe, that our children are fed and are safe, and our men are learned to walk and talk as they should. So, Father, dismiss us with your blessing, bless this food our body is about to receive, and use us this day to account of the good things of the Lord, and to remember the atrocities to the people of this land, that they may never happen again, neither in action nor in thought, or how they treat our young ones. May our young ones be safe, and help us to make that happen. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Do you want to finish off anything?
You've all really deserve a well-earned break. And we want to encourage that to happen very quickly. Some very quick acknowledgements. We want to thank our First Nations brothers and sisters for their leadership and their authority in permitting this day to go ahead and to hold it on country at this place. Thank you so much. We want to thank the National Parks and Wildlife Service. They love what we have been doing for a few years now, and they just do everything that they possibly can to help this gathering go forward each time. I want to thank the Truth-Telling Act of Recognition team. Without you, and some of you who have worked so incredibly hard against all sorts of obstacles that tried to stop this day from taking place, our heartfelt thanks to you. Finally, we thank you, the gathered brothers and sisters, for your company on this day. Bye-bye for now. Go and enjoy something to eat. Well, I included them in the whole team, actually, but a special thank you to the film and our sound team. Thank you so much. And we better thank the tent people as well. Good on them. God bless them. Thank you very much. Yes, a yarn up here tomorrow for those people who did not get a chance to speak and who have issues that are really important to you. We will sit down here together at 11 o'clock tomorrow, and that very unstructured opportunity will be available to us all. Thank you.